Get a job and stop being a leech. The words cut across the dinner table like broken glass. My daughter-in-law's voice was loud enough that even the neighbors could have heard through the open window. For a second, the room went still, forks frozen midway to mouths, the scent of baked lasagna hanging heavy in the air. And then I did something that no one expected. I laughed. It was not the brittle laugh of someone defeated, nor the nervous chuckle of someone caught off guard. It was deep, steady, and strangely liberating, because in that single moment, Sabrina had revealed herself more clearly than in the past 4 years of insults, sighs, and pointed silences. What she did not know, what none of them knew, was that I was worth more than $5 million. Behind my worn sweaters and second-hand shoes, behind the modest one-bedroom apartment with its creaky radiator and mismatched dishes, lived the truth of a woman who had built her own empire from nothing and chosen to step away from it in disguise. So I leaned back in my chair, still smiling, and replied with a calmness that seemed to unnerve her. "Sweetheart, you may want to start looking for a new place to live." The silence that followed was heavy. My son Caleb stared at me with wide eyes, his fork clattering softly against his plate. He looked at Sabrina, then back at me, unsure which way to turn. The irony was almost unbearable. This house, with its polished floors and suburban charm, had been purchased with my money years ago. They had never known the deed bore my name. Tonight, sitting at their table, like an unwelcome guest, I realized that the time for pretense was drawing to an end. I forced myself to focus, to remember why I had chosen this strange life. For years I had told myself the lie that I was struggling, that I had nothing left. It was the lie I needed to tell so I could see who my son had become and who he had chosen to love. The dinner invitation had come earlier that week, Caleb's voice hesitant on the phone, Sabrina's sharp whispers in the background. "Mom, come for dinner Friday night. Sabrina is making her famous lasagna." Famous, he had said. I nearly laughed then, too. The woman could barely boil pasta without scorching the pot, but I had agreed, as I always did. Now, staring at Sabrina's triumphant smirk, I knew this dinner would be remembered for reasons she could never imagine. After I left their house that night, the autumn air of Detroit felt sharper than usual, cutting across my cheeks as I walked the 6 blocks back to my apartment. The streets glowed with the orange of dim streetlights, and every step echoed with a question. How much longer could I keep living this lie? My building looked tired, just like me. The bricks were chipped, the elevator creaked when it worked at all, and the hallway always smelled faintly of old paint. I unlocked the door to my unit, stepping into the carefully staged poverty I had built around myself. The sagging sofa bought from a thrift shop. The chipped coffee table rescued from a garage sale. The faded curtains that let too much of the street light in. All of it intentional. A costume I wore every day. I had money, more than enough to live anywhere in Detroit. I could have taken a condo with glass walls overlooking the river, or a house in Grosse Pointe with manicured lawns and a private driveway. But instead I lived here, and every second of it was by choice. It had started after Harold, my husband, walked out when Caleb was barely 8. He left with a suitcase, a younger woman, and no backward glance. I swore then that I would never depend on another soul for survival. Through sheer willpower, I built a small logistics company from nothing, hauling freight, hiring drivers, working night and day until it grew into something real. By the time I sold it, the contract was worth millions. I thought I had won, but winning came with its own price. When people know you are wealthy, they smile differently. They look at you like an opportunity, not a person. And after Harold, I needed to know if anyone, especially my son, would still see me as Marian, the mother who sacrificed. Not Marian, the woman with a bank account big enough to silence doubts. Caleb, my only child, was 35 now, handsome with his father's sharp jaw and my stubborn eyes. He worked as a manager at a small Detroit firm, and for a while, I thought I had done well. Until Sabrina entered his life. At first I wanted to believe she loved him, but it was the little things. her sideways glances at my clothes, her polite but pointed questions about whether I still drove a car, the way she sighed whenever I mentioned Caleb's childhood, as if my memories were inconveniences to her story. She made sure, little by little, that I felt like an outsider. Even at dinner that night, I noticed the details. My plate was chipped, while theirs gleamed. My glass mismatched. My chair at the farthest end of the table. Small humiliations, invisible to anyone who wanted to ignore them. But I saw them, and I remembered every one. The next Friday came too quickly, and with it, another dinner invitation I could not refuse. Sabrina liked these little performances, where she could play the gracious hostess while cutting me down piece by piece. I told myself I could endure it, just as I had endured worse in my life. But something in me already knew that this evening would be different. The dining room table glittered with polished silverware and wine glasses that caught the chandelier light. Sabrina moved about with theatrical gestures, wearing a fitted red dress that shouted for attention. Caleb sat across from me, shoulders tense, eyes darting between us like a man waiting for a storm he knew was coming. We spoke of harmless things at first. Caleb's work deadlines, the weather in Detroit, Sabrina's latest yoga retreat. But then her smile sharpened, and she turned the conversation to me. "Marian," she said sweetly, her voice carrying that razor edge, "have you considered finding something useful to do? A job, maybe? My cousin's grandmother works at the local grocery store as a cashier. It keeps her busy and gives her a little spending money." I set my fork down slowly, as if it weighed 10 pounds. A grocery store cashier. After decades of running my own business, after nights spent in cold warehouses and early mornings signing contracts that shaped entire supply chains, this woman thought I should stand behind a counter, scanning barcodes. Caleb shifted uncomfortably, but he said nothing. His silence was worse than her insult. Sabrina leaned forward, emboldened by the lack of resistance. "You know, you're only 61. Plenty of people your age are still working. It's not healthy to just sit in that tiny apartment all day. Caleb and I want to start a family soon. We can't keep carrying the weight of someone who refuses to contribute." The words landed like blows, each one calculated, cruel. I felt the air grow colder, though the house was warm. I folded my hands in my lap, forcing my voice to remain calm. "Is that what you both think of me? Dependent? A burden?" Sabrina's eyes gleamed. "Let's be honest. You rely on us for everything. It's not sustainable." For a moment, I just looked at her. The arrogance, the ignorance, the sheer blindness to the truth sitting right in front of her. And then something inside me shifted. "You have no idea what's coming for you," I said quietly. Her smile faltered. Caleb's head snapped up. Silence fell across the table, like a shroud. For the first time in years, Sabrina looked uncertain. And that was enough for me. 3 days passed before Caleb finally called. His voice was strained, almost hesitant, as if he wasn't sure which version of me he would find on the other end of the line. "Mom," he said quietly, "can I come over? We need to talk." When he arrived at my apartment, he looked around with that same mixture of pity and discomfort I had seen 100 times. The peeling paint on the door frame, the thrift store sofa sagging under its own weight, the lamp that flickered when the heat kicked in. He took it all in, as if it confirmed every belief he had about my helplessness. "Mom," he began, "this place, it's so small, so depressing. How have you lived like this for so long?" I poured him a cup of coffee from the expensive beans I kept hidden for special occasions. He blinked at the taste, surprised. Then I sat down across from him at the little kitchen table and folded my hands. "Caleb," I said, "you asked what I meant the other night. It's time I show you." From the shelf behind me, I pulled down a thick folder, its edges worn from years of handling. I slid it across the table. He opened it reluctantly, flipping through pages of bank statements, property deeds, and investment portfolios. His eyes widened as the numbers came into focus, figures he had never imagined his mother could possess. "Mom, what is this?" "This," I said steadily, "is who I really am. Your father left us this, but I built a company from nothing. I sold it before I retired, and I've been living off investments ever since. I'm worth over $5 million, Caleb. His hands trembled as he turned another page. But the apartment, the clothes, no car, you let us think. I let you think what you wanted. I interrupted gently. Because I needed to know, I needed to see who would still treat me with love when they thought I had nothing left. He sank back into his chair, face pale. So all this time, you were testing us. I was protecting myself, I corrected, from people like Sabrina. People who see kindness as weakness, who mistake modesty for poverty, who use others until there's nothing left. Caleb rubbed his face with both hands. She has treated you badly, hasn't she? I looked at him, my only son, the boy I had raised alone. She has treated me like dirt, Caleb, and you stood by and let her. The words hit him harder than any slap could have. And for the first time, I saw regret in his eyes. The call came only 2 nights later. Sabrina's voice, shrill and commanding, crackled through the phone. Marion, we're having a family meeting. Tonight, 7 o'clock. Be there. She didn't ask. She ordered. I almost laughed. Little did she know I had been preparing for this exact moment for years. When I arrived at their house, I wasn't the shabby widow they were used to mocking. I wore a fitted black dress, a pearl necklace Harold once gave me, and a pair of heels that clicked across their polished floors, like a warning. Caleb opened the door, his eyes widening as he whispered, "Mom, you look like yourself again." In the living room, Sabrina perched on the sofa, like a queen awaiting trial, her arms folded tightly, her red lipstick bold against a scowl. Several relatives had been invited, her sister, her cousin, even Caleb's old college friend, clearly recruited to witness my downfall. "Good," Sabrina said when she saw me. "Now we can get everything in the open. You've been lying to us, Marion. Pretending to be poor, manipulating Caleb, making us worry. That's not normal behavior. You need help." Her voice dripped with false concern, but her eyes glittered with triumph. She thought she had cornered me. I set my purse on this coffee table, slowly unzipping it. "You want everything in the open, Sabrina? Fine. Let's put it all on the table." From inside, I pulled a manila envelope and laid it flat. With careful hands, I slid out the contents. Printed emails, attorney consultation notes, and photographs. Caleb leaned forward, frowning. "What is this?" "Proof," I said evenly, "that your wife has been consulting an elder law attorney, asking about guardianship, about how quickly she could gain control of my finances if I were declared incompetent." The room went silent. Sabrina's face drained of color. "That's a lie," she shrieked. "She's twisting everything." "Is it also a lie," I cut in, "that you have over $52,000 in hidden credit card debt, that you've been pawning jewelry and replacing it with fakes so Caleb wouldn't notice? Because I have those records too." Gasps circled the room. Sabrina's sister looked away, embarrassed. Caleb froze, staring at his wife as though seeing her for the first time. I reached for the final piece of paper, holding it up for everyone to see. "And here's the deed to this house. My name is on it. Not yours, not Caleb's, mine. You've been living at Bethlehem, system that's under my roof, Sabrina, as my guest. And tonight, your time here is over." Sabrina's eyes widened in horror. She had built her throne on sand, and the tide had finally come in. Sabrina didn't leave quietly. She never would. The night I revealed the deed and the debt, she stormed upstairs in a fury, slamming doors and throwing clothes into a suitcase. Her sister followed behind her, whispering frantically, but Sabrina's rage echoed through the house like thunder. 30 minutes later, she marched out with her luggage, tossing me a glare so venomous it could have cut glass. "This isn't over," she hissed before the door slammed shut, and she meant it. The very next morning, the phone calls began. First Caleb's aunt, then his cousin, then even an old neighbor. Each repeated the same story. Poor Sabrina, victim of a cruel, manipulative mother-in-law who had secretly lied about everything. They said I had humiliated her, thrown her out, even threatened her safety. I listened, silent, to each accusation. I didn't defend myself. Let them reveal where their loyalties lay. But Sabrina wasn't content with gossip. Within days, her version of events flooded social media. Carefully crafted posts with blurry photos of my modest apartment appeared online, captioned with phrases like, "Elder abuse is real," and "Some women are so twisted they destroy their own families." Friends and strangers showered her with sympathy. Comments poured in, condemning me as heartless and ungrateful. Caleb showed me one post on his phone, his face pale. "She's painting you as a monster," he whispered. "That's because she's cornered," I said calmly. "A cornered person lashes out, and when they lash out, they make mistakes." But I underestimated just how far Sabrina was willing to go. One gray Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Blake?" A firm female voice came through. "This is Detective Karen Lopez with the Detroit Police Department. We've received a complaint regarding allegations of elder abuse and financial exploitation. I need you to come down to the station to answer some questions." For the first time in years, a chill ran down my spine. Sabrina had crossed the final line. I thanked the detective, hung up, and sat very still. The walls of my shabby apartment seemed to close in around me. But I refused to panic. Instead, I reached for my phone again and dialed the one number I trusted without question. "Jonathan," I said when my attorney answered, "we have a situation. My daughter-in-law just accused me of elder abuse. Meet me at the station in an hour." There was a pause, then his steady voice. "Bring everything we've prepared. It's time." I closed my eyes, exhaled slowly, and felt the weight of years of silence lifting. Sabrina thought she had finally won, but she had just made her most dangerous mistake yet. The next morning, I arrived at the Detroit Police Department, dressed not as the fragile widow Sabrina described, but as myself. A navy dress, pearl seal earrings, hair neatly pulled back. Beside me walked Jonathan Reeves, my attorney of nearly 20 years, carrying a leather briefcase that held the truth. Detective Karen Lopez greeted us in a small interview room. Her eyes flickered with surprise when she saw me. Healthy, confident, far from the vulnerable old woman Sabrina had painted. She cleared her throat, shuffling papers. "Mrs. Blake, your daughter-in-law, Sabrina, has filed a report. She claims you are being financially abused by your son, that you live in poverty because your money is controlled, and that when she tried to intervene, you retaliated against her. She provided photos of your apartment and bank statements with low balances." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were grainy photographs of my living room, taken through the window when she thought I wasn't looking. Furniture staged to look pitiful. Bank statements from my small expense account that rarely held more than a few $100s. Jonathan leaned forward. "Detective, may we present our own evidence?" I opened my folder and laid out my true financial records, investment portfolios, property deeds, trust accounts, all current, all legally documented. The detective's eyes widened as she scanned the numbers. "This shows us assets of over $5 million, she murmured. "Correct," Jonathan said. "My client chooses to live modestly. She is in full control of her finances. There is no abuse. In fact, the only exploitation here has been attempted by the complainant." I slid another set of papers across the table, emails and consultation notes from the elder law attorney Sabrina had contacted. "She wasn't worried about my welfare," I said quietly. "She wanted to know how quickly she could obtain guardianship over me and liquidate my assets." The detective's brow furrowed. "These are serious accusations. They're documented facts," Jonathan replied. "She also has over $50,000 in hidden debt. She pawned jewelry, replaced it with fakes, and spread rumors of my mental decline. This police report is nothing but a desperate attempt to cover her tracks." Detective Lopez sat back, tapping her pen against the table. "If what you've shown me checks out, Mrs. Blake, then Sabrina has filed a false report, a felony. That means she could face arrest herself." I felt a calmness settle over me. Detective, I would like her prosecuted to the full extent of the law, and I want a restraining order keeping her away from me and my son. The detective nodded firmly. You'll have both. 2 hours later, sir, my phone buzzed with a message from Caleb. His words were short, but they carried the weight of years of blindness finally lifting. They arrested her. Mom, what happens now? I looked out the window at the Detroit skyline, feeling the storm clouds finally break. Now, I whispered, we rebuild. That evening, Caleb came to see me, not at the shabby apartment he thought I lived in, but at my real home. A penthouse high above the Detroit skyline, glass walls glowing with the sunset. When he stepped inside, he froze, his mouth opening and closing like he had forgotten how to breathe. Mom, this is where you've been all along? Yes, I said softly. This is who I really am. I kept it hidden because I needed to see the truth, and now you know it. He walked slowly through the living room, running his hand along the polished wood furniture, staring at the paintings Harold and I once picked out together. He turned back to me, his eyes shining with shame. I let her humiliate you. I let her call you names. Names, treat you like nothing. And I stood by. I touched his arm gently. You were blinded by love, Caleb. It happens. What matters now is what you do with the truth. 6 months later, the divorce papers were signed. Sabrina stood in court, pale and furious, as the judge read her sentence. 6 months in county jail for filing a false police report, 3 years of probation, and restitution for my legal costs. She also received a restraining order that barred her from contacting me or Caleb. The life she had built on lies collapsed around her, piece by piece, until all that was left was the echo of her own cruelty. Caleb, though, was free. For the first time in years, I saw my son smile without the shadow of her judgment hanging over him. He started spending more evenings with me, sharing dinners and laughter, rediscovering the bond we thought was lost. And one day, he told me he had met someone new, a kind woman named Leah, a school counselor who drove an old sedan and thought Olive Garden was fancy. She had no idea Caleb's mother was wealthy, and that, I thought, was a good sign. As for me, I stopped hiding. I sold the little apartment I had used as my disguise and donated much of the furniture to families who truly needed it. I began volunteering at a local women's shelter, teaching them about financial independence, about never letting anyone control their worth. When I look back now, I see the years I lost pretending to be less than I was. But I also see the gift hidden inside that pain, the clarity to recognize who loved me for me and who only loved what they thought I could give. The lesson is simple, yet sharp as glass. Kindness is not weakness. When people mistake it for weakness, they eventually learn the difference. And that night, standing on my balcony with the lights of Detroit glittering below, I whispered to myself the words that carried me through it all. I will never again apologize for who I am.